This is Indian Country Today.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Trahant. Here are the headlines from Indian Country Today. The confirmation hearing for Deb Haaland took on larger issues in the Senate Tuesday. As Washington Senator Maria Cantwell said, she recognizes Haaland's confirmation as a proxy fight for future fossil fuels, even though her job is simply carrying out President Biden's agenda. Republicans on the committee raised questions about past statements, tweets, and Haaland's presence at Standing Rock. Haaland told North Dakota Senator John Hoeven that, "Yes, I did go to stand with the water protectors. I know that tribal consultation is important, and that was the reason that I was there." Montana Senator Steve Daines dismissed any racial overtones in the debate, saying, "I would love to see a Native American serve in the cabinet. That would be a proud moment for all of us in this country. But this is about her record and her views." National civil rights groups have joined forces with tribal leaders and environmental groups in supporting Haaland. A letter signed by nearly 500 national and regional organizations calls her a proven leader and the right person to lead the charge against the existential threats of our time, including climate change and racial justice issues on federal lands. The Urban Indian Health Institute released a report that graded all 50 states on the quality, collection, and reporting of COVID-19 data as it relates to American Indian and Alaska Native people. The report states that poor data collection standards implemented by states has resulted in a big gap in understanding the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on people of color across the U.S., specifically American Indians and Alaska Natives. The report graded states based on 4 categories. The poorest score came from Texas, followed by New York, New Hampshire, Maryland, and West Virginia. They all received an overall grade of F. Minnesota, Vermont, Maine, and Arkansas were the only states that received an overall A grade. The grade of all 50 states was a D+. More evidence that tribes are getting ahead on efforts to vaccinate citizens, as the Hopi tribe is now vaccinating anyone 18 years and older who lives in the service area. The tribe is located in northern Arizona, and tribal officials say if they vaccinate up to 90% of the population, they can ease up some of the COVID-19 restrictions. People have been lining up at the Hopi Healthcare Center in Palaca to get the vaccine. Guards guided them to a specific area where the healthcare workers pre-screened each carload and then placed a card on the windshields with the appointment time for the vaccine. Patients are escorted into the building to get their vaccination. Currently, there are 1,365 positive tests on the reservation that has a population of roughly 7,000 people. U.S. Poet Laureate Joe Harjo has been chosen to address graduates at Smith's College commencement ceremony. Harjo is Muskogee Creek Nation and the first Native American to serve as the nation's Poet Laureate. Her keynote address will be at the college's May 30th commencement. The ceremony is expected to be held in person for students only. Harjo is known for such collections as The Woman Who Fell from the Sky and In Mad Love and War. Her honors include the Penn Open Book Award and the Wallace Stevens Award for Lifetime Achievement. As a signature project as Poet Laureate, Harjo created a website called Living Nations, Living Words. The website features a digital map of 47 contemporary writers, including Harjo, Louise Erdrich, and Natalie Diaz, with the writers reading and discussing their original poems. Smith said Harjo will also receive an honorary degree from the Liberal Arts Women's College. And those are the headlines from Indian Country Today. I'm Mark Trahant. When we come back, we'll take a deeper look at a pipeline controversy. How is Line 3 impacting Native communities? There's the Dakota Access Pipeline and the Keystone XL Pipeline, and thousands of other pipelines crisscrossing North America. One that's particularly important is Line 3. Enbridge is building the 334-mile long oil pipeline across northern Minnesota. Called Line 3, it's part of the company's huge Mainline pipeline system and will carry 760,000 barrels of oil per day, including tar sands oil from Alberta, Canada to Superior, Wisconsin. Much of Line 3's path takes it through treaty and reservation lands on which the Ojibwe have relied on for centuries to harvest traditional wild rice, hunt game, and collect plant medicines. Water protectors opposing the project face more than sub-zero temperatures in their struggle to call attention to the short-sighted, profit-driven project that ignores the dangers of climate change wrought by continued dependence on fossil fuels. They risk angering friends and family members who work for the company in this job-strapped region. It's a messy, deeply human affair, and Indian Country Today's Marionette Pember takes us to the front lines.
It's minus 11 degrees in Palisade, Minnesota, but water protectors are hard at work putting together an educational event/winter festival to call attention to the negative impacts of Enbridge's Line 3 pipeline. The city of Palisade and Aiken County refused to allow them to hold their event in the area's public park, so they simply moved it to a friend's private property. Denying water protectors use of public space is emblematic of Enbridge's powerful economic hold over the region, effectively robbing them of their constitutional rights to free speech, according to Shanae Matson. Born and raised in Palisade, Matson is currently living at the Honor the Earth's Water Protector Camp, where she and others are working to oppose Line 3 and educate the public about the pipeline's long-term negative impacts on the environment and economy.
There's a way that it feels like it's putting me in conflict with people that I care about and people in my community, because I know how they feel and they know how I feel. And it seems sometimes like there isn't common ground anymore, because it's, you know, the pipeline is ripping through the community, and a lot of people here believe that it's like they've said, it's a done deal. It's inevitable. Why are we bothering to protest? Are we just causing problems? And that's is such an important part of this work. And we really want people to understand that we're not just protesters. You know, we're actually water protectors.
Matson was shocked when she was denied a permit to use the park. She reached out to Aiken County Sheriff Dan Gaida, who was copied on emails regarding the denial.
Kind of upset, you know, he responded to me in email and he said, you've been involved in unlawful assemblies. They have every right to use that against you, but they're not. And so, you know, he said in this email that he believes that the city and probably the county have the right to use against me my participation in what he quoted as unlawful assemblies. I've never been cited. I've never been arrested for unlawful assembly.
Enbridge has pumped large sums of money into local communities along the pipeline route through donations, jobs, tax revenues, and money for local policing. Pipeline opponents believe this money has bought goodwill and support for Enbridge from community leaders eager to keep their economies on the upswing. Matson and others reached out to the Center for Protest Law and Litigation in Washington, D.C. for help. The director, Mara Verheyden-Hilliard, wrote a letter to City of Palisade and Aiken County leaders accusing them of violating the water protectors' First Amendment rights by denying them access to the park and failing to provide legal justification or a clear appeal process for the decision. In the end, water protectors held their event on private land nearby and marched down to the Mississippi River in Berglund Park, where they offered prayers and songs. About 60 miles further east along the Line 3 route, Taisha Martineau of the Fond du Lac Band of Ojibwe is also experiencing pushback from family and tribal leaders for her work opposing Line 3. Although the Fond du Lac Band of Ojibwe originally opposed the project, they agreed to permit Enbridge to build the pipeline through the reservation. The Minnesota Public Utilities Commission green-lighted the project, so the tribe was faced with an impossible choice. Either they approved the original route or the company would reroute around the reservation through a more environmentally vulnerable area. In exchange for supporting the pipeline route through the reservation, Enbridge paid the tribe an undisclosed sum. Tribal leaders also agreed not to publicly oppose the project. Many tribal citizens, like Martineau, disagreed with the tribe's decision and are actively opposing it. In January, the single mother of four organized a GoFundMe campaign in which she raised $30,000 to purchase a plot of land immediately next door to an Enbridge construction site on the Fond du Lac Reservation. She and her fellow water protectors named the site Camp McGeezy. They have locked themselves to construction equipment to stop or delay construction on the pipeline. At other times, they've stood by, quietly holding signs against the construction. Martineau was recently arrested for trespassing on an Enbridge construction site. Although water protectors were also present, she was the only one arrested. Martineau is concerned that tribal leadership may retaliate against her by banishing her or barring her from tribal housing.
We know that they had targeted me specifically because I am the landowner and I'm hosting all of these brave, amazing water protectors, and I'm from here. And so they see me as an Indigenous leader within the movement. I've been confronted directly, yeah. And, most of my relatives who confront me, they're scared. They're afraid for my children. They're afraid for my ability to have a house over my head. It's fear that has them yelling at me.
Even though she is breastfeeding her youngest son, she won't let that deter her from actions opposing the pipeline.
And we've got a deep freezer full of milk, just in case mom ever takes a trip down to the jail. And then I've got a portable breast pump that I take with me everywhere. And that way, if I'm ever arrested off the line, more often than not, the confrontations are from elders or community members who will pass me tobacco in secret and thank me for the work that I'm doing. And it's really, that respect there and that community support that helps keep us going. There is a lot of people who don't want to see us do the work that we do, but it's those ones who do that keep us going.
In Palisade, Minnesota, Marionette Pember, Indian Country Today.
When we come back, we'll take a look at the busy week in our nation's capital. Holly Cook Macarro is a familiar face. She's a regular contributor to Indian Country Today, explaining what's going on in Washington. She is a partner at Spirit Rock Consulting. Thank you, Holly, for joining us.
Good morning, Mark. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Let's start with the House. It's expected to vote Friday on a $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill. And at this point, at least, $350 billion is targeted to states and tribal governments. What's the next steps in this?
Well, I don't know that I think there's 350 billion, that there's $20 billion directed for tribal governmental relief. And then there is somewhere in the neighborhood of $8 billion that will go to support tribal programs within on the federal side, to the BIA, IHS, BIE, et cetera. So the large chunk that I think tribal governments are tracking very closely is that $20 billion. And as the bill says, $1 billion of that will be distributed pro rata between the 574 tribes that are on the annually published federal list acts. And that comes out to 1.7, I don't recall the exact number. And then the $19 billion will be distributed via a formula determined by the Department of Treasury and the Department of Interior. Now, yesterday at the NCAI conference, Speaker Pelosi committed to sending a letter along with Senator Schumer. I don't know that she made the commitment on his behalf, but certainly from her corner, that the priority, sending a letter to the Departments of Treasury and Interior outlining the intent of Congress. Because of the guardrails and the limitations of the budget reconciliation process, they couldn't include specific language directing the formula. But they do intend, and it was requested that that letter be sent in a timely fashion, to send a letter over asking that the data set be that is used allow for the self-certification by tribes of their tribal populations. And it was noted that tribes know their communities best. And certainly knowing their enrollment numbers is something every tribe knows and knows intimately usually. And including direction to the Departments of Treasury and Interior to also include economic factors in their consideration of the distribution formula, not just simply a population. It was noted the disaster and inaccurate numbers that were cited in the previous administration, and certainly wanting to avoid that situation. So the distribution formula is going to be a key part of, in the coming weeks, for tribal leaders, an opportunity to weigh in on. NFOA is holding a tribal leaders strategy call on Monday, which I think with key members of the House, Congressman Kildee and others from Ways and Means, that will be discussing and receiving tribal leader input. And I understand with the bill, the Department of Interior and Treasury will be the lead agency. And I understand that the Congress is looking for Interior to play a much more significant role this time in determining that formula. If you recall, the CARES Act said Treasury will decide the formula in consultation with Interior. Now, excuse me, with a friendly administration of the same party, they are looking for a more equal partnership in the determination of that distribution formula. And tribal leaders should be on the lookout for consultation notices and opportunities to weigh in with what their viewpoints are.
The big picture here, I think, for viewers is that it's really complicated for tribes because they're operating social programs, they're operating services, they're offering healthcare. They're also running businesses that have been really impacted by the virus and the pandemic. And trying to recover from that is a complicated challenge.
Yes, it is. And I think that is why the consideration of economic factors in any distribution formula is going to be important. There are, for instance, in the state of California, whose populations were decimated through the genocidal actions of colonization, the process of statehood, and others but have significant economic enterprises and large numbers of employees in the state, and economic impacts in regions that sometimes are the most significant in their counties. So ensuring that economic factors are included and providing for tribes like the Navajo Nation, this bill allows for flexibility, longer deadlines to use the funds, and also provides for lost revenue in cases where an economic enterprise may solely be based in one sector. But certainly the opportunity to do long-term projects and help address foundational issues with the impacts of the pandemic and Indian country, like building water infrastructure. Those types of long-term projects we hope will be facilitated in the distribution of these funds. As I mentioned last week, this is an unprecedented infusion of resources into Indian country, and how that's distributed, how tribes are able to use that is going to be a really critical conversation in the coming weeks.
Speaking of foundational issues, let's turn to the other side of the Capitol, the United States Senate. Representative Deb Haaland has been going through her confirmation hearings, and a lot of focus right now is on both Senators Joe Manchin and Lisa Murkowski. Where do we stand on her hearings and kind of the steps ahead?
I have it going on the screen here as well. Her day 2 of her hearing, day 1 was yesterday, it was continued today in order to do a second round of questioning. A general feedback from the Hill that I was hearing is that it went very well for her yesterday. There were concerns, and I think comments made from the Republican side of the aisle that they remain very concerned about her positions on climate change and oil and gas and fracking in particular. But we have to remember, those are the positions of President Biden, and he chose Congresswoman Haaland because she is like-minded, and for him to have chosen anyone else would have been ridiculous in terms of agreement on policy. I have been, it's almost comical to see the hypocrisy in place when you see, not just for Congresswoman Holland, for Neera Tanden and others, that this high bar they're setting for past statements or tweets that have gone out, and these are senators who, for the last 4 years, have allowed the most vile and racist tweets to go on without comment from them. And yet these nominees, Biden nominees, including Congresswoman Holland, are being held to a standard that they did not hold prior nominees to. And I've actually, there's been a quiet conversation, certainly in Indian country, certainly among Native women, about the sexist nature. Is this because she's a Native woman? And some major outlets, and the Billings Gazette came out very strongly, really in response to Senator Daines' position, Congressman Rosendale's statements. Congressman Rosendale in particular, called tribal leaders' positions and statements pathetic and a case of identity politics. When without addressing I think the hypocrisy of his own statements. So that has been recognized. Mark Udall, former senators Mark Udall, former Senator Tom Udall, and I thought this was particularly important. It may not have, they did an op-ed in USA Today. I don't know if it got a huge play or reaction in mainstream America, but on the Hill, the Udalls are beloved and well-respected on both sides of the aisle. And they made a very strong case for the objections coming from the GOP side. They're not based on logic or reason or recognition of Congresswoman Holland's alignment with President Biden on policy and issues, but really are a cloak for objections to her race and her gender. That was an extremely strong statement. And I'm hopeful that those have an impact, that the recognition of this conversation and the double standard that is being put in place for a woman of color, a Native American brown woman with an activist past, who might be out of some senators' comfort zone, and their objections should be based on her record and her alignment with President Biden.
Well, in fact, it's interesting that members of the Republican Party in the House are actually the ones saying they can work with Representative Holland and have a good track record doing so.
Yes, I thought Congressman Don Young, the most senior member of the House, Republican from Alaska, and a key point that he is a Republican from Alaska, because Senator Murkowski is uncommitted. She has not indicated one way or the other which way she is going to vote, and she's on the committee. Don Young gave a glowing endorsement with a specific emphasis on Congresswoman Holland's ability to work across the aisle, her highest ranking as a freshman, and in passing bipartisan bills with bipartisan support. Those were really very critical. And Congressman Don Young has been, as I said, around longer than anyone else. So for him to recognize that, for him to take the time to walk across to the other side of the Capitol and introduce Congresswoman Holland was very significant for her and for impacts in the Senate.
You think about the politics of all this, and we only have about a minute left, but this is an issue that Indian country across the board is going to remember forever, really, and how people come down on it. Absolutely.
And I noticed really going through a lot of the coverage and the commentary that it's not just the voters in the state of Montana, the Native American voters, where that vote is 10% of the population, or in Alaska, where it's similar, at 10, 11% of the population, huge. Those Senate races in those states can be won in the single digits. So the Native American vote can determine the winner of those states, of those Senate seats. But they also come knocking in other corners of the country for resources as well to help fund their campaigns. And there's been no more significant event in Indian country than the nomination of Deb Haaland to the cabinet as Interior Secretary. Everyone is watching, and I don't think that the voters in Indian country will forget how their senators and senators across the country land and vote on her nomination.
Holly Cook Macarro, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Mark.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world today. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with another edition tomorrow. I'm Mark Trahant.
Indian Country Today is recorded at the Phoenix Indian School Visitor Center in Phoenix, Arizona.
This is Indian Country Today.